About a week ago now, Canon announced the EOS RP. And when it was announced, the internet just went into meltdown. I mean, full-on meltdown. I mean, it made the Chernobyl disaster look like a fender bender.
It's very likely that we're all going to die.
I think the internet went even more crazy about the RP than it did when Trump got elected president. Now, the RP has received a huge amount of flack, particularly from YouTube reviewers, because of the crippled video features. I mean, Canon are renowned for crippled video features. That was never in doubt, but Canon with the RP took it to a whole new level. My biggest gripe with the RP, to be honest, is the naming structure. I have no idea where Canon are going with it. I mean, I know Canon like confusing naming structures, okay? They've got 3 different naming patterns for their APS-C DSLRs, depending on whether you live in Asia, America, or Europe. I thought they'd got their shit together when they moved to mirrorless, because they had the M, then the M2, then the M3, then skipped the M4 because 4 was unlucky in Asia or something, onto the M5. So far, so good. Then they had the M6, which was higher than the M5 but lower in specs, and then they had the M50, which was on par with the M5, but I don't get where they're planning on going with adding extra letters to the end of existing models. Unless RP just stands for, you know, it's an R plastic. Having had time to dwell on the specs a little bit, I would actually argue that Canon didn't cripple the specs of the RP enough. I mean, from a stills perspective, the camera's okay. I mean, it's got the 6D Mark II sensor, which has never won awards for performance compared to, you know, other current generation full frame sensors, or even current generation APS-C sensors for that matter. It might have crap dynamic range, but it still opens you up to the full frame lens market. It opens you up to the high ISO noise performance, so there are some benefits there. So if you're somebody who's only shooting stills, you're already invested in the Canon system, so you've got Canon lenses, but you want to move into full frame and a mirrorless body, then yes, the RP is an affordable proposition for you. Where Canon have really taken a chisel to the specs of the RP is more in the video side of things. Because the 4K still has a crop factor. Granted, the crop factor is not quite as bad as the R because it's a slightly lower resolution sensor, but it's still an APS-C kind of crop factor. You also lose dual pixel autofocus in 4K. You're stuck with contrast detection, which is shite. But that kind of level of cripple really isn't a surprise from Canon anymore, because that's the same thing they did with the M50. However, they've taken it even further than anybody could have ever imagined, because they've dropped the 24p from the 1080 recording. There's no 120 FPS in not only full HD, but not even in 720 either. And strangely, you can't use EFS lenses in full HD. You can use EFS lenses in 720 and 4K, but not full HD. So there's no question here, Canon have purposely tied lead weights to the video specs of the RP. However, I don't think Canon actually got their own memo about that, because the marketing department is still pushing this as a camera for not just photography, but also for filmmakers as well. But all the filmmakers are slamming the camera for the lack of 24p in full HD, for the cropped 4K, for the lack of autofocus in 4K. Now, some would argue that those limitations are in place to keep the price of the camera down. Well, that's complete crap, because it would cost Canon no more money to put those features in. It's all software features within the limitations of what the camera can do. It can already shoot 60 and 30 frames a second in full HD, so it's more than capable of doing it. Canon have purposely removed it because they're thinking if people want 24p, they're going to have to buy the EOS R. Same with the dual pixel autofocus in 4K. The camera's more than capable of doing it. The sensor already has dual pixel autofocus built into it. The processor is the Digic 8, which is the same processor used in the EOS R, which has dual pixel autofocus in 4K. So the only reason the camera can't do dual pixel autofocus in 4K is because Canon have switched it off. Now, why do I think they've added too many features to the RP? Because they've intentionally crippled the living crap out of the video on a software level, but they've still included a mic port and a headphone jack into the camera. Now, mic and headphone ports are only any use to video shooters, they're no use to still shooters. Now, the microphone port you could half argue for vloggers, but the headphone port is more for filmmakers. So the people who care about a headphone jack and to some extent a microphone port are the people who are looking at this camera from a video perspective, and the video features are shot to shit. Now, Canon's logic behind the RP to me half makes sense. The idea of making a really affordable full-frame mirrorless camera far cheaper than any other current generation full-frame mirrorless on the market is fine by me. Yes, they've crippled a load of the video features, so it's not going to appeal to video shooters, but it will appeal really, really well to still shooters. So that bit makes sense. It will annoy video shooters, but it's going to be a huge benefit to the stills community. What doesn't make sense is why in the search for let's make this camera as cheap as possible, have they removed a load of stuff that is all firmware related, but still spent money putting additional ports into the camera that are only for video shooters. Not including those ports in the camera surely would have made the camera cheaper. So why not just go the whole hog, remove everything video related from the camera, and have an even cheaper camera that is more fixed at stills? Because most people who are looking from a serious perspective for a camera shooting video aren't really looking at the RP. They're more than likely going to be looking at the R or going to be looking elsewhere. I think Canon would have just been better off just saying, do you know what? Here is a cheap, affordable full-frame camera for stills. Sorry, video shooters. I mean, if Canon were making road cars here, they'd have just made some two-seater sports car and bungee strapped 2 child seats to the roof and called it a family hatchback. So if you're gonna cripple the features of a camera to bring the price point down, actually cripple the features that add to the price in the first place. But what are your thoughts and opinions on the matter? Do you think Canon were right to include some video aspects of the RP? Do you think they should neglect everything and just make it a stills camera? What do you reckon? Leave your thoughts and comments in the box down below. Thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.